Hey folks, it's Ray at Rainmaker.com here, and today we have a complete recap of the Apple Watch Series 7 launch. I'm going to run through what's new from a feature standpoint, from a hardware standpoint, tech specs, pricing, availability. That's a pretty interesting one, in fact, in this video here, and talk about everything that's changed and everything that hasn't changed as well. And I'm going to do it all in exactly 7 minutes on the dot. Of course, later on, I will do a full hands-on, in-depth review once I have a unit in hand or on wrist. But for now, let's talk about what's changed. The very first thing is the display is larger. They've gone from a base size of 40 to 41 millimeters, and the larger units from 44 to 45 millimeters. This represents a 20% larger display compared to the Series 6, or a 50% larger display compared to the Series 3. Now, despite this larger display, Apple says the unit itself is actually just about the same size. In fact, the bezels now have been shrunk down to 1.7 millimeters, the smallest bezels to date on an Apple Watch. You can see this most clearly side by side here with the Series 6 showing the larger display. Apple says the new display is 70% brighter than the Series 6 indoors, and they highlighted the indoor side of things, in particular a scenario where you just want to be able to glance at your wrist and see the time there, so it makes it a little bit easier to see indoors than it would have been in the past. And now just a quick note, if you're finding this video interesting or useful, simply whack that like button at the bottom. It really helps out this video and the channel quite a bit. Next, in numerous points in the presentation, they outlined mountain bikers crashing, in particular to highlight the durability of the screen. They said the screen is now 50% thicker in terms of the actual crystal there that's used on the top of the screen, 50% thicker and the most durable Apple Watch to date. With that, they added IP6X dust resistance, as well as maintain the existing water resistance of 50 meters. Or WR50 water resistance rating. Now with this larger screen, Apple highlighted a bunch of scenarios where they have increased the button size, the user interface size within the display itself. So the actual exterior buttons remain the same, but the user interface buttons are increased. For example, in the Activities app, in the Stopwatch app, in the Alarms app. And then they also talked about areas like text messaging, where now 50% more text can fit in the screen. You can see it here side by side with the Series 6 and showing quite a bit more text. Alongside of texting, they've got a new full keyboard on the watch itself, so you can go ahead and do regular tapping of keys or swiping of keys, whichever way you like. And then also on the software side, Apple's added in 2 new watch faces, including one that's definitely more fitness sport driven. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. Now, I think one of the most interesting changes on the Series 7 is actually around the charging. So while the battery life remains the same at a mostly disappointing 18 hours, they did change the charging side of it. And they noted that now they have a charger that's 33% faster. And in particular, they said it's a new internal charging mechanism, which isn't clear if older chargers will work. They'll be shipping with a new USB-C charger, meaning that the end of the plug is USB-C. It's still that puck on the back, but it's not clear if that puck is compatible with old units or not. However, the new faster charging, it means that you're able to go from 0% to 80% in 45 minutes. And then most interestingly, adding 8 hours of sleep tracking within 8 minutes of charging. So if you're just realizing before bed that your watch is almost dead, you can go ahead and just simply put it on the charger for 8 minutes by the time you brush your teeth or whatever, and then you're kind of good to go for the whole night. Of course, in sleep mode, they're turning off a lot of stuff. Typically, they reduce the backlight display, they reduce the amount of notifications or entirely eliminate notifications during sleep tracking. So a lot of that kind of stuff tends to reduce the battery life, which means they can get away with a lot more in just that 8 minutes of charging. Now, most of the software feature changes on the Series 7 are actually coming from WatchOS 8, which was announced back in June. And there's a slew of new features there. I'm not going to get into all of them in this video. I'll save that for my full review. But they did announce 3 interesting cycling updates. And given this is like a sports and fitness channel, I figured I'd kind of talk about those. One is they're going to automatically detect cycling or bike riding. So you better automatically start a workout from that if you want to. Number 2 is they've added fall detection during workouts, and in particular highlighted cycling is an example of that. So if you do fall, you'll get an alert on your wrist that shows that you fell, and then it'll automatically notify people if you don't respond within a given time frame. And then they've added e-bike workout support. And that may sound, if you're not like in the e-bike world, that may sound kind of counterintuitive, but e-bikes work by basically assisting your power so that you put out a certain output and then it matches that output at varying rates. So it could be 20% rate, 50% rate, or 100% rate, effectively doubling it. Now in this case, up till now, if you had a cycling workout with an e-bike, that meant that it basically was like overcompensating, giving way too many calories. Apple's introduced a new e-bike profile that will go ahead and look at the heart rate as well as the GPS and try to figure things out a little bit better than in the past. Thus giving you more accurate calorie calculations for that particular workout. Now from a colors and bands perspective, there are 5 core colors of the Series 7 in aluminum. And then there are 3 new stainless steel colors that you see right there, followed by 2 titanium colors. And then there are 2 Apple Watch Nike Edition colors or models. And then finally, 3 new Hermes models as well. Apple also says there's a boatload of new bands, and most importantly, all existing bands are compatible with the Series 7. Probably an interesting nod to some of the rumors that have been swirling over the last couple weeks that existing bands won't be compatible. That was clearly called out in a slightly different voiceover tone that existing bands are compatible. Apple then threw up their usual sustainability and environmental slide, talking about where all the materials come from and which portions are recycled versus not recycled. And then finally, we got to pricing and availability. And this is where things got a little bit sticky, namely the availability. We don't really know when. They just said, quote, later this fall. And fall goes to like mid-December by the official calendar timeframe. This is the first time, I think, ever Apple has basically said we don't know when we're going to release this. Typically speaking, Apple Watch models are released about 10 days after the announcement. So this being a Tuesday, typically released next Friday, versus this year they're saying sometime in the fall. And that matches what we've heard from Bloomberg and other sources, saying that the manufacturing process has been a bit challenging for the Series 7, combined with the general supply chain woes of the world right now. Thus, the timeframes are a bit delayed. However, the pricing side is pretty straightforward. Apple's keeping 3 models in the lineup: the Series 3 starting at $199, the Apple Watch SE from last year at $279, and then the new Series 7 replaces the Series 6, coming in at $399 or starting at $399, depending on which particular features and models and sizes you want. Now, there are undoubtedly other things that are not highlighted in the presentation. That's the case every single year. For example, we often see changes in the optical heart rate sensor under the covers, as well as the GPS and other chipset changes that could have an impact on accuracy, as well as battery life and other things that we'll find out once we actually get them hands-on, whenever that may be. So if you want to stay tuned for my full in-depth review, then definitely go ahead and whack that subscribe button down the bottom there so you're notified as soon as that happens, whenever it is that happens. And since we're about 10 seconds ahead of schedule, I'll let you watch that crash again, and more importantly, what I presume to be the daughter's look of disappointment in her dad. With that, have a good one.